Merhaba, selamünaleyküm. Good morning.
Good morning. Merhaba. Alaikum assalam.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Morning.
Good morning. So good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome everyone. So we have very important two guests. One is Aydin Anwar. I would like to start with her CV first, and in the bio. Aydin Anwar is an Uyghur American and outreach manager of the Save Uighur campaign under the Justice for All, and she works for a non-profit organization dedicated to issues on Muslim oppression. During her youth and college years, she had worked heavily in East Turkestan advocacy by raising awareness through media, film, public speaking, and working on relief efforts for Uyghur refugees in Turkey. She has spoken on multiple media outlets, with her most notable piece on Now is garnering over 100 million views worldwide. Aydin holds a BA from Duke University in International Comparative Studies. Thank you very much for joining us. So I would also like to read Memet Jan bio very quickly. Memet Jan Juma is the Radio Free Asia's Deputy Director for the Uyghur Service, has been with Radio Free Asia for 12 years. He assists the director in Uyghur Service day-to-day operation, including news gathering, news producing, and so on. Besides producing news at RFA, he has been interviewed by Al Jazeera, Vice News, Washington Post, New York Times, and economists on Uyghur issues and China's human rights abuse in Uyghur region. Radio Free Asia's Uyghur Service has been at the forefront of the fast-evolving news about China globe, like mass incarceration of Uyghurs in internment camps. Radio Free Asia is a private non-profit that was established by Congress to bring uncensored, trustworthy news to people living in Asian authoritarian countries, including China. It is one of the 5 networks under the independent U.S. federal agency, USAGM, which oversees VOA, Radio Free Europe, Cuba Broadcasting TV and Radio Marti, and the Middle East Broadcasting Network. Again, thank you very much for meeting with us today. Welcome. You can start. Thank you very much. Well,
Thank you for having us.
first, please welcome.
Aydin, why don't you start?
Assalamualaikum. I mean, I don't really know like what exact. So, how much do you guys want me to go through like a kind of quick recap as to the situation? What is the, what exactly is the agenda?
So actually, you can talk about, like your advocacy, what is your experience, and what you do in Turkey too, because you were also in Turkey with the Uyghur refugees there. So, and after that, maybe, Memet jump in and talk about more.
Okay, inshallah. Okay, so good morning, everyone. If most of you guys are in the United States or on this side of the world, my name is Aydin. I was born and raised in Virginia. the DC area, but I'm ethnically Uyghur. So my family hails from East Turkestan, which you may have heard as Xinjiang, which by the way is a name that China had renamed our territory to. We though call the land East Turkestan, as that is the more original name, and basically implies that we are. I mean, the name itself implies that we're the land of the East. It's a land of the Eastern Turks. And so I kind of grew up, hearing about the situation back home, because by the way, for those who don't know, the situation that you have heard now that probably due to this event or to listen, has been actually ongoing. The oppression has been ongoing. It just wasn't until recently, since 2017, when China started actively detaining thousands upon thousands, and now millions of people into modern-day concentration camps and prisons, that we started to see the media wake up and start to hear about who we are as a people. For the longest time growing up, when somebody would ask me where I'm ethnically from, I would tell them, I'm Turkic, or I'm Uyghur, and from East Turkestan, they would actually have no idea what I'm talking about. So, and it would usually end up being followed by a 5-minute history lesson or 5-minute educational rant type thing. But alhamdulillah, now I think more and more people are learning about us and our situation. But essentially, the Uyghurs and other Turkic people within East Turkestan have been enduring decades of occupation since 1949, when Communist China came to power. And so what we're seeing now is an extension of that occupation. So going into kind of how this advocacy started, I particularly started in late high school. This is in 2015, when this is actually before the camps officially started, or what we knew, or before we actually knew that these camps were being built, because the Chinese government had actually planned for these camps to be built starting in 2013, so it was actually pre-planned. But in 2015, we didn't know this was going to happen. But essentially, this was a time when it was still. The situation was still pretty intense. The surveillance was increasing, and people started. I mean, I went to East Turkestan in 2008, so I was a pretty young. I was a young girl then, but it was interesting to see how. For me, it was eye-opening to see how what was supposed to be considered my ancestors' land, my family's land, is so dominated by Han Chinese presence, and later I would fully learn that this is part of an occupation. You go to Urumqi, and it's almost in many ways unrecognizable, in the sense that there's just so much Chinese presence there, and I'm like, how is this? How is that connection made, right? So you can see that occupation taking place just in that form itself. And seeing kind of the lack of religious practice there, how a lot of my own family and relatives were kind of brainwashed and basically telling me to take off my hijab, because they were like, oh, this is something, why only older women wear, and I'm like, no, not necessarily. But I also realized this was part of a structural issue where practicing religion wasn't normalized, or going to Islamic school, learning Islam in a formal manner was not a thing. And I was shocked. I was a little girl, and I was like, why is my aunt or uncle telling me to take off my hijab? This is really weird. But part of me was, but they were also, later on I found they were also trying to just protect me from possible interrogation on the streets, because they just didn't want me to face any trouble. But again, this was 2008, right? This is before things got significantly worse. Things got significantly worse in 2009, when the Urumqi uprising happened, which started off as peaceful protests, and then soon Chinese state started cracking down on Uyghurs and other Turkic people, detaining and imprisoning people in mass amounts. And then from there, we started to see increased surveillance. And so late high school is when I started, essentially, I remember my father he organized an awareness event at a public library, because the rooms are free. We didn't have any resources. We were kind of just on our own, trying to just raise awareness of what we have. And so he kind of just not forced me, but he essentially was like, you should just do the presentation. This will be a good learning experience for you. And he wanted me to, he wanted to improve my public speaking skills. Obviously, I was a really shy person then. And so basically for the event that happened, I gave a presentation about what's happening, went through the history. It was really comprehensive at the time. And And so I think that was like the first spark of the advocacy, because after I went through that round of learning everything formally, or trying my best to learn on my own as an Uyghur person and what that meant, I realized, like, that's when I was like, this situation is bad. And this was, again, before the camps, right? So, and I was like, how does the world not know about this? Like, how are we going about this when there's literally a genocide happening? And at the time, we still called it a genocide. Right now, people are saying, okay, it's a genocide now. But even before then, there were so many genocidal acts and policies since 1949. And it's like, and this is not like a population of, 100,000. It's literally like over 20 million people being oppressed, right? Trying to cleanse our population is way less than that. Like they claim it's maybe max 10 million, but Uyghur sources estimate it's much more. And the whole land is so vast as well. And when people think about our land, they think of China. They see Xinjiang. They have no idea. They think of us as a Chinese minority, which is also, by the way, kind of cringeworthy, because again, that narrative erases the fact that we've been occupied people, hoping to restore that land and sovereignty, just like Tibet, for example. So yeah, from there, and then college happened, and I went to college and did undergrad, and during that time, that's when things started to get significantly worse. I found myself, pretty actively speaking, talking to my friends about what's happening. It just became a natural flow of the conversation, because it was so emotional at the time as well. Like, a lot of my friends didn't know who Uyghur people were until I started talking so much about it. I was active in MSA, the Muslim Student Association, and started making that into an issue that my friends would start caring about. And then towards junior and senior year, I started getting more involved in on the ground advocacy, being part of like protests and demonstrations. I went to Turkey to, at the end of my freshman year, there was a fellowship program where essentially you're able to embark on any kind of project that you want to kind of it was kind of like a free-for-all fellowship where they fund your program. And I basically went to Turkey with the purpose of trying to interview Uyghur refugees to basically learn more about the situation. I was like, after that high school experience where I was, learning things myself, I was like, okay, I actually want to know more beyond just speaking to my parents, who obviously saw a lot growing up. I want to speak to more recent refugees who have just escaped or, and have seen a lot of the horrors. I went to Turkey in Istanbul, brought my camera, and I was hoping to create like a small documentary film out of it. Unfortunately, it didn't really kind of go the way I wanted, but I still was able to interview a lot of these people and record them. And I think that trip was kind of the turning point in the way I thought about the world, and the way that basically from there I kind of pledged. I was like, there's no way like we can stop. We can just remain in our own bubbles and just pretend like it's not happening. Because I was talking to prisoners, former political prisoners, who talked to me about how they got tortured, who showed me exactly the positions that they were forced to sit in for over 12 hours a day in a prison cell. I talked to a mother whose daughter was sentenced to 9 years of prison because her daughter decided to wear the hijab or the abaya. And that girl was my age. She was sentenced when she was 19 years old. So at the time I was 19. And so I was like, what's the difference between me and her daughter, other than the fact that I was, born and raised in a country that doesn't crack down on religion in that way, And so I honestly came back with like secondhand trauma, because I was so, I was just so angry, and I was angry to see like the way when coming back to campus, I was angry to see the way that people were just so focused on their own little life, like not to belittle anyone's lives, I don't mean to say that, but like it was natural for me to be like, oh my God, there's like. So I was imagining like the way people were getting gang raped and forced to take sterilization and whatnot, and I was like, this is happening on a mass scale, and like here I am at this university, studying biology. Like, what am I doing? It was just like this very like this was the natural response that I got personally, right? And I would get really annoyed at like kind of when people complained about really mundane things. And I think this was just later on I realized, okay, this is not healthy, right? Like I have to tone it down a bit. But I think that was a turning point where I started to become more dedicated towards the cause. I was trying to figure out more on an activist advocacy level, what is there more to do other than raising awareness? Although for the longest time, raising awareness felt like the only thing we could do, because people were like, if you wanted to get people involved, they didn't know enough to do something. So oftentimes we just found ourselves trying to educate the population, educate them about the occupation and so on. And then, so from there, I started doing public speaking. More and more people, I think 2018 of August is when the media kind of exploded about what's happening in the camps, or saying that 1 million people had been detained. During that summer, I also happened to be in Turkey again for a fellowship with TRT World, which is a Turkish-based news channel, but it's also in English. They focus on world issues. So I was there to, gain some experience, in journalism, and then trying to also amplify the Uyghur issue as well. At the time, though, TRT, because it's kind of run by the Turkish government, they weren't allowing me to publish anything that was or write in anything that was Uyghur related, because they were saying, oh, we're getting pressure from the Chinese embassy and so on. So that was an experience. And from there, I just started to continue. Senior year of my college, I started doing public speaking and giving presentations. And eventually now I work for, so it's been a year since I've graduated, and since then I've been working for Justice for All, which is a human rights nonprofit that focuses on forms of Muslim oppression around the world that don't get much attention. So we focus on the Uyghur campaign, like the East Turkestan issue, and so we focus on Rohingyas and now Indian Muslims that are being oppressed. So that is a quick rundown. I think that was pretty long, actually. So I think we'll stop here so we can have Brother Memet Jan step in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing this event, and thank you, everyone, for participating. And thank you, Aydin, for giving a very comprehensive introduction on what's happening in Uyghur homeland around the world against the Muslims. Like we talked about, Radio Free Asia focused on the news, especially the Uyghur section. Uyghur Service focuses on the news that China addresses. China didn't want to hear, the world to hear about. And yes, let's talk about what's happening in the Uyghur region at this moment. Like Aydin said, the history of oppression is not new, but the scale, especially magnified since 2009 and especially 2017. And so far, right now, according to the experts and human rights activists, as well as scholars, China detained 1.8 million to 3 million Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in internment camps. And some would say concentration camps, some would say mass incarceration, and RFA is using the terminology of internment camps. So that's, people have different ideas, and but mostly some activists are calling it concentration camps because of the characteristics of those camps would hold. How they, I don't want to call them detainees, because they're not detained because they committed any sort of crime. They were just rounded up, being taken away for no other reasons. So you cannot call them detainees, you cannot call them inmates, you cannot call them, according to the researchers, and especially some lawyers, you cannot call them just anybody else, because they didn't fall into those categories, because they didn't commit any crime. So there are, at this moment when we speak, 1.8 million to 3 million Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims, including Kazakhs and Kyrgyz, are rounded up in those camps. And recent study investigation done by BuzzFeed, even though Chinese diplomats, including Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign secretary, diplomat, the top diplomat said that most of the detainees or people, trainees we would call it, students were released. According to the BuzzFeed, China is still constantly extending the camps. And they also recently identified about more than 200 newly built, 286 to be exact, newly built camps across Uyghur region. China likes to call it Xinjiang. And the name itself also, China calls it Xinjiang. Uyghur people like to call it East Turkestan. That's the historic name. And China also likes to call it, that land belongs to China since the antiquity. But they call it Xinjiang. Xinjiang means new domain. So the itself also, the name itself doesn't really match Chinese narrative. And I recently talked to a historian. He said China didn't lend a foot since Tang Dynasty, 1,000 years later, 10 decades, 10 centuries, 10 millenniums, 1,000 years later. So Tang Dynasty briefly landed to this land, maybe about 30 years or so, they left. And then when China was saying that China Uyghur land belonged to China, Uyghurs had empires, like many kingdoms. The latest one would be the one that occupied by Qing dynasty. Qing dynasty was not a Chinese dynasty at all. So that's the Qing, the Manchurians. Manchuria also invaded China. So China also invaded by the Manchurians, and Uyghur land was occupied by Manchurians. So that's the brief history lessons. So that's the place. Uyghur call it Eastern Turkestan because Uyghurs are one of the Turkic peoples, as well as Kazakhs and Kyrgyz is also Turkic peoples. That's why they call that East Turkestan. And China calls it Xinjiang. So in that land, China built right now after 1949, the Sin's occupation, this oppression became heavier and heavier right now. So up to 3 million people are rolled up in both camps. And that's the history of the situation right now. And what's happening inside the camps? So also according to the research, recent study done by Diplomat, it's also done by intensive interviews by former camp eyewitnesses as well as camp teachers. So what's happening in the camp? One was a 51-year-old Uyghur female teacher. She was sent to a camp built around the capital Urumqi. And that camp is called, ironically, called Retirement Center. Look at that name, Retirement Center. In that retirement center, there were 10,000 Uyghur females, mainly Uyghur females. Some of them are graduated from many high-ranking universities around China, some of them from overseas, mostly educated, beautiful, capable Uyghur females, 17 years old to 50-something years old. There are systematic rapes every day. In that camp, in that retirement center, China is, and they're being sterilized because, according to some other researchers, the rape might result from unwanted pregnancies. So those women, it's very uncomfortable to talk about, and I'm sorry, but they are systematically raped in that camp. So, and according to another eyewitness, people are dying in that camp because there is no water to wash, there is no enough nutrients to sustain your health, there is no enough space to sleep. So they just, one witness account told us that this little 3x space was overcrowded by 40-some people. There's no enough space to sleep on if you just lie down side by side, not long, lying flat. There is no any mats on the floor. So you have to side by side, you sleep. And then while 12 people would stand on guard, because they don't have any space to sleep. They have to stand up. So this woman told us over the past span of like 3 months, she witnessed 9 deaths. One collapsed while watching over, while one just didn't wake up while sleeping. So others just died. In 3 months, she witnessed in one cell alone 9 deaths. And they also, this is the same kind of explanations by many witness accounts. They hear torture, the sound of crying, sound of moaning, just beating, as well as torture by electric batons and being tied into this chair. So this is the same a description of what's happening in that camp, where it is it's happening. So the recent study shows that China built 1,200 camps around the region. The Aydin Anwar, a German scholar who's a researcher at the Jamestown Foundation, so he gave this number to Reuters. Reuters said China built, according to him, China built 1,200 camps on every little town in Uyghur region. Even though China said this is the camps are already dismantled, but BuzzFeed said, and the recent study, and using Chinese website, they do, the Chinese IT company like Google, and they also listed on New York Stock Exchange in the United States. And using that technology, because Beidou also smeared, just blurred the location of the camps because China told them to do so, I believe. So a company who listed in New York, complying with the Chinese government to hide the location of the camps, somehow BuzzFeed was able to identify those locations, newly built locations, 268 in that region. And we talked about camps, right, and oppression, and the rates in that camps, according to the news media, according to the researchers. And AP also published a research recently. It's a very intense and a very extensive research done by scholars as well. According to the research, they used Chinese available data from 2015 to 2018. Birth rate in that region, we're talking about Uyghur homeland, plummeted by 60%. 60%. More than women talked to the researchers, said that they were forcefully sterilized, done the operation, and inserted with IUDs. And that scholar said that constitutes, might lead to label that what's happening in the region is a genocide. This is what not what I said, but according to the scholars, genocide, that might constitute, that alone would constitute genocide. So this is basically what's happening. So according to Uyghur lawyer Nuri Turkel, Chinese policies enforced upon Uyghurs is a policy of a genocidal intent. That's what he said. So basically, genocide, this word itself is a very heavy terminology. There's a lot of weight. It's not easily to use. It is not a joke. So people are coming to this understanding that what's happening in Uyghur region, for example, the Washington Post also said, let's call that genocide, what's happening in Xinjiang. So people are coming to terms that what's happening in Uyghur homeland might constitute genocide. That's what's happening. That's what they're saying. Especially recent Washington Post op-ed. Let's say, let me read the title of that. Hope I can find it. Yes, it's published July 6, 2020. The title is "What's Happening in Xinjiang is Genocide." And even this Jewish woman, Diane, she publishes a lot of articles on Jerusalem Post, and she also said normally genocide and the Holocaust is a terminology that's used. What's happened to the Jewish people, the tragedy that happened to the Jewish people during the World War II, and they don't take that word lightly, and they would be offended if it would be used against other, modern-day atrocities. But she also said that we don't have any other comparison. We should compare what's happening in Uyghur homeland towards Uyghurs to what happened to Jewish people. There's no any other comparison to compare. So this is what's happening. Unfortunately, except for some Western countries, including the United States, they're leading becoming the leading voice to count China, to hold China accountable. Unfortunately, we cannot see other Muslim countries just following through, because unfortunately, we're witnessing that they're just supporting China's policies. So this is what's happening. This is the recap, and I can stop at that. And if you have any questions, we can just continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Memet and Aydin. Actually, I have a question. So right now we also hear that Mongolian, Tibetan are under the threat too. So when you compare the situation with Uyghurs and Mongolian and Tibets, what you want to talk about that?
So
I didn't do wanna talk about it.
Yeah, so for those who are listening and don't know, so Inner Mongolia recently, there was news on recent protests that broke out because of China's crackdown on Inner Mongolia, basically. Right now, specifically targeting the language. Basically, China is trying to replace teaching Mongolian with Mandarin, and that sparked a lot of outrage, and people were saying this is the beginning of a cultural genocide. And so a lot of this is confirming a lot of our hypotheses or kind of general statements about how East Turkestan actually served as a guinea pig region, kind of an experimental region for the rest of other parts of colonized China, perhaps even China proper itself. So like Inner Mongolia is being cracked down upon, Tibet as well. Now we even learned that Hui Muslims have been sent to concentration camps as well. So people who don't really have a territorial claim at stake, but they are just practicing religion. They are also being cracked down upon. Religion in general is being cracked down upon. So people are starting to kind of, and then now obviously there's also the issue of Hong Kong as well. This is, I would say these are big, obviously, red flags that what's happening in Inner Mongolia can just be the start of something bigger, unless, swift action is taken and that the Chinese government is held accountable. But clearly they've seen that what they've been doing to the people in East Turkestan has been effective in erasing us as a people. And so they're like, why not just carry this out in a different region? But slowly but surely, they're not going to do everything at once. You first target their language, then you start targeting their religion, then you start building these camps and prisons. One thing leads to the next, and genocide has taken place. So that's a quick rundown of kind of the overall layout, or when you think about everything happening. It's East Turkestan starts off with being the super severe, intense crackdown. A lot of these policies are then extended to other parts of other parts that China has colonized, and also Tibet obviously has been enduring decades-long of occupation as well. But the concentration camp discussion hasn't really been as vast as it is, in Tibet than it is in East Turkestan. But there is still crackdown. And Inner Mongolia is now one of those areas where people are starting to really, take a step back and be like, okay, wait, hold up, this is going out of control. And now with protests happening, obviously, I think people, hopefully some changes takes place with that, but with the Chinese government kind of in control, a lot of times peaceful protests end up turning really brutal. So let's pray that these rights are met.
Can I add something to it?
Yes, please, go ahead.
It's so what's happening in Mongolia? The news: China banned Mongolian mother tongue to be taught. I don't know what school levels, but that happened to Uyghurs since 2001. So basically, since 2001, China eliminated Uyghur language from university levels. So I was taught in Uyghur language in universities in Uyghur's homeland. We had a lot of scholars. Some of them were in many fields, like in NASA, for example, who were educated in Uyghur language, are working in international organizations, scholars in every subject, from string theory to, chemistry or nuclear physics. Everything was taught in Uyghur, actually. We got, the Uyghur language itself, for example, the same language is running a government in Uzbekistan. It's same language running a government in Turkey. So China said, oh, your language is very backwards. You cannot use this language anymore because we replace your language with a modern, more developed language, which is Chinese. And maybe narratives in Mongolia, for example, oh, your language is backwards. We have to give you some more of a developed language they would use. But that language is running a country out of Mongolia, for example. Mongolia, that country is there. They're running the schools. Every system is run by this language. So language doesn't have any kind of problem there. That's the Chinese narrative to by non-Chinese people. So 2001, China eliminated Uyghur language from university levels, and little by little. So after 2009, Rimchi, a peaceful protest, China just forcefully tracked it down, and many people were killed. According to Nurbekri, the former governor of that region at the time, he was sentenced for life recently, though. He said at least 12 people were shot by the police. That was what the Chinese government said, but many people would believe that China killed many Uyghurs at the time. But we couldn't confirm as a media organization. I cannot. So since 2009, and then little by little, the schools were becoming integrated. China said Uyghur schools should be integrated with the Uyghur schools, so Uyghur students would be more capable of learning new things. So middle school level Uyghur language was eliminated. We couldn't say a word. And up to 2016, basically Uyghur language, the Uyghur language was limited to homes, actually. So Uyghur language is used in college levels or primary, high school levels, middle school levels, and 2016, August, it's mid-August, when Qin Chuanguo, the present-day party secretary of that region, was assigned to work in Uyghur region. They issued a notice. We call it, let's say, it's order, actually. All Uyghur schools Uyghur language should be banned and on every school level. So Uyghur school officially being banned in 2016. And Uyghurs didn't protest at all, like Mongolians right now. If they did, maybe God knows what would have happened. So basically, Uyghur language is being stopped, it's being taught. So right now, Uyghur kids are taken away from their homes and being brainwashed. And so in government-run orphanages, according to Uyghur human rights organizations, there are 500,000 Uyghur kids are being separated from their parents, while their parents are being incarcerated in those camps. So apart from that, many Uyghur kids, even though your parents are still at home or lucky enough to be able to live with your parents or grandparents, so you're not able to be taught your language. You're just taken away from your home and put in this kindergartens. Government say this kindergartens and or boarding schools. Every 1 week you return home or just you're being taught Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, and you didn't have any chance to learn Uyghur. So what's happening in Mongolia could be the beginning of what's happening in Uyghur region right now. So this is very alarming. That's very alarming. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have one other question on the chat. So realistically, how can international community help Uyghur Turks and force China to become accountable for its action?
I guess I can start with this, and Brother Memet Jan, you can add as well. So there's a lot that needs to be done from a more individual level, starting off with, again, rate awareness, but in making sure that this is a conversation that extends beyond a webinar, or making sure that people talk about it and are actively seeking more knowledge and action. I think number one is that. Number two is now, there are more and more, I guess, coalitions and organizations coming together. People are coming together to target companies that are engaging in forced labor. So right now, there are thousands upon thousands of a lot of the Uyghur people who are in these concentration camps or prisons that are being forced to essentially become modern-day slaves and are producing or are part of the production of a lot of the merchandise and a lot of the products that we buy from, or where we typically buy from brands like that are very popular, actually. So there was a recent report by ASPI listing out 83 companies that are complicit in the genocide because they run factories or run a lot of their core items are actually produced in East Turkestan by modern-day Uyghur slaves. Some of them, off the top of my head, I'll be saying Nike, Adidas, and then you have places like Gap, Carter's, and there are so many more companies listed where we all, like Calvin Klein, Ralph Polo Lauren, really the list goes on. And so there has been campaigns to target these companies, call them out for what they're doing, demanding a response from these companies. So I know Nike hasn't really, they actually didn't have not been held accountable for their actions. They're kind of just denying it, just pretending like nothing's happening, even though there's very clear evidence of that over 80,000 workers were actually used to produce their shoes. And so this is actually, and so there has been demands from the Uyghur Forced Labor Coalition, which consists of over 100 organizations, basically demanding that these companies completely cease existence. So usually when it comes to forced labor activism, usually that's not usually an ask to completely seize everything. But right now with this situation, it has to all end completely. So completely get out of East Turkestan and also the rest of China, because now with criticism happening with East Turkestan, a lot of times they're transferring Uyghur people to parts of mainland China so they can continue this work. But this time it's just more, it's more unknown or less known because it's not in East Turkestan and China can't face that criticism. So forced labor is one of those things that people, and we're calling on people for those in the United States to call on your local, to call on your congressperson or your representative to support the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which essentially will prevent any forced labor goods from China from entering the United States. This is something that is currently being worked on. We're having advocacy days for, and right now we're also pushing for, right now the United States recently imposed sanctions on Chinese officials for their crimes using under the Global Magnitsky Act, basically freezing their assets and having imposing visa restrictions. But we're calling on other governments as well to continue those sanctions and for everything to kind of be multilateralized, so that it's not just the U.S. government that's cracking down, because oftentimes with that comes the narrative or the idea that this is part of that the Uyghurs are basically just like U.S. puppets, and like all the they're just trying to basically a lot of times we get the criticism that we're CIA agents, which is like crazy, but people get that people think that way because the U.S. government is one of the few governments that has taken open action. Obviously, obviously it is a lot of times due to the political situation between China and the U.S., but at the same time, that doesn't take away the current reality of what's happening. So there's been that push, but on an individual level, again, basically also also just assessing your local community, your universities, institutions around you that may have ties with China, and basically trying to use your network and to contact the administrations of these institutes and talking with them and making sure that they cease all ties with China and any type of entity that will be complicit with this oppression. So if you're a university student, if you're a professor, oftentimes American universities are tied to the oppression. I know with multiple Confucius institutes on campus, they're fully funded by the Chinese government. So the Chinese government is able to exercise soft power on American campuses, and they will oftentimes have really strict restrictions as to what can be promoted and what can be put out there. And so that's another example of of that kind of complicitness. MIT for the longest time had partners with 3 Chinese tech companies that were in charge of surveilling the Uyghur people. And so we had a campaign to target and call MIT for being part of that. And so they actually retracted with their partnerships with, I think, at least one of the companies, I think SenseTime, which apologize for that, but that's an example. MIT, again, is one of those top universities. You'd never imagine them being part of a campaign to essentially round up millions of people, but they were. I know I graduated from Duke. Duke had a university. It has a university on China. It has a campus in China, right? And Duke, because of that relationship, Duke is not able to do much, or they've remained silent. Again, which is another form of complicity. It's also obviously it's hard to just tell a school to shut down an entire campus, but these are all just things to keep in mind when you're looking at places around you and how they're connected to the Chinese government. So in this case, I'm particularly talking about universities, since I just graduated from one, and the activism is pretty fresh, but these are just examples of some of the things off the top of my head that we're asking people to do, and really just make this into a conversation that you talk, you try to engage with all the time.
Thank you.
Yes, I think you did a great job. I don't have anything to edit, but I can just talk about the slave labor because I have a family member who was working in a sweatshop after his internment in those camps for 3 years. I got a brother, for example, he graduated from one of the top universities in China, in Mandarin Chinese, and he doesn't have any need to be educated or to be taught, to be, anything about Chinese in the camps. He was detained illegally, and he was taken to this camp and sent almost 3 years. And then recently, the news that I got, he was transferred to a prison-like facility where he forced to work 12 hours a day to produce garments and as well as earphones. So I don't know if the earphones made by one of those unfortunate people in this location. So according to the BuzzFeed News, many factories are built in those highly secure highly fortified buildings where it's surrounded by barbed wire as well as watchtowers with armed police. So this is not only in Urumqi but many locations according to other news media. So, and as well as us, China built factories, they call it factories, and they said that they providing jobs for Uyghurs inside the camps. So many people, I don't know how many, but many people are forced to work in the prison-like facilities. And I'll give you one example why it's prison-like facilities, because when my mother was sick, very severe condition in a hospital, my brother asked for leave for 15 days to see her because she might, the news was told us that she might depart from us in any moment. So he was not given any permission. He can leave only once a week if in an ideal condition. He can live just one day in his home and then he has to return to the factory. And but he was not given permission to go to see my mother, for example. So this kind of situation, this is similar to many. This could not only to my brother, but many people who are in those kind of situations. So they might face the same problem. China called them, we gave them jobs, and we provided them with training, but that's not, that doesn't seem to be true when it comes to my brother, for example. He was educated. He used to have a big kind of media company in Urumqi. He was making good enough money. He didn't need any training. So this is what's happening right now. But maybe we don't know how these garments and the earphones are being used, maybe exported to those countries, maybe including the United States. We don't know. We don't know. So when we talk about international community, so we cannot only talk about the United States or countries in Europe, the Western countries. The international community should constitute should include some 20 more than 20 Arab countries and other Muslim countries, including Turkey, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Malaysia. So Malaysia is becoming the leading voice when it comes to speaking against China. And Pakistan, basically, they're just buying whatever China sells to the media and just parroting what China says. Like, oh, we're training the Uyghurs. Oh, it's a good thing that the Uyghurs are being trained. Even some media outlets in Turkey just parroting the Chinese narrative. Oh, it's a good thing that the Uyghurs are being trained and given jobs, and some Arab media has the same thing. And only one Muslim reporter, Ulsi Yazaji from Albania, he was he went there. He's a pro-China writer before. He was questioning the American narrative. They say, oh, America might be wrong because the China is a nice country, number one, number two economy. Why you can do that? So I had to go and find out myself. He went there and he questioned many people, asked a lot of questions, and at the end he said, "Oh, maybe America was right. These people are detained against their will." And I think when he asked about this guy couldn't even just respond. Because he was so scared to respond the greetings in an Islamic way, for example. Because of that, he's only one reporter questioning Chinese policy. Because China was taking delegations of pro-China countries, reporters to China, and asked them to just write, just portray some good side of China in their media. So that seems like that worked. So unfortunately, when we talk about international communities, we cannot see those part of the international community saying anything. So not only about, just like Aydin laid out, introducing bills or sanctions but not even the media is criticizing China, which is unfortunate. So I don't have anything to say, any recommendations, because as a journalist, I cannot tell them what to do, but I'm telling you what I see, what I read. So that's what's happening. So that, unless the narrative in the Muslim countries wouldn't change, we cannot see any positive voice is coming from those countries, Yeah.
I would like to ask, the historical destruction of East Turkestan, because many mosques were demolished by Chinese. So if you can touch this point too, I will be happy.
Yes, China called it the mosque rectification policy. For example, from 2015 to 2019, according to Uyghur and other human rights scholars as well as researchers, China demolished 10 to 15,000 mosques across the Uyghur region. And the report shows that in Atush and in Uyghur, there were 3 mosques. And 2 of them were less, one of them is better condition, bigger in structure-wise, and it's built in a safe manner and decorated well. But that mosque was destructed, and the lesser, smaller, and less secure one is kind of kept safe, according to the Chinese people's term. And that's what's happening. China said we are just remodeling or rectifying, making it beautiful, bigger, but on the contrary, China is demolishing even bigger and nicer mosques across the Uyghur region. That's what's happening. That's what happened. And unfortunately, when this Uyghur holy site, in a hotel, for example, one Uyghur cemetery was erased, and on top of it, a parking lot was built. And some parks are built in some Uyghur resting places. So China said we should use this land for everybody. That means that Uyghurs' graveyards, the resting place, are also not safe in China, right? Not let alone the Uyghurs who are living and breathing, but Uyghurs already passed away. There's holy sites. Desecration of holy sites are happening in massive scale, according to the studies. And we don't see any word coming from so-called Muslim countries. And I tell you one example. My name is Memet, right? It's the Uyghur or Turkish version of Muhammad, right? And China banned that name. Uyghur people cannot name their kids Muhammad or Khadija or any, you name it, any Muslim prophets or prophets from history. You cannot name your kids. We have the documents China issued, first-hand documents. We also made news out of this. And when the name of a religion, a prophet of a religion is banned in a country, a Islamic country, one country cannot stand up and say, oh, it's not good. You cannot say that. So that's a green light for China. We didn't see any one protest, one voice. Islam is one of the biggest religions in the whole world, right? More than 2 billion people, if I'm not mistaken, follow. Out of 2 billion people, we cannot see one person, one Islamic leader saying that you cannot do that. You cannot desecrate holy sites. You cannot destruct mosques. You cannot ban Muslim names. And didn't say that. So China tested the water. It happened even before, like 2013 or 14, that just like Aydin said, that China started building the camps. I mean, not the camps, but big size, mega prisons. We also reported on that one. In 2014, we found out that in Urumqi alone, China built a prison city, they call it. 7 different prisons. One can hold 20-something thousand people in Urumqi. So it started in 2010. We found out, and the Uyghur neighborhoods were being segregated with barbed wires and the checkpoints, things like that. We didn't see any anymore. So China touched waters little by little, little by little. So nothing happened. So voila. So 3 million people ended up being in the camps, and it's been almost 4 years, and China said many students are graduated, but according to the BuzzFeed, there are 268 newly built camps, and many of them have factories inside. So this is the situation.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would like to conclude if you don't have anything to say. So because I know that you are very busy.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us today and like telling your experience and your information about the situation. Personally, it's very important for me because I know the situation where I'm coming from. There are many Uyghurs around me. So also, as I told you before, my father is also originally from East Turkestan. So yeah, we really learned that after the test. We took it. Yeah, so it's became much more important for me. So thank you very much for being today with us and we will do our best just to do, work hard and hopefully, try and be accountable. Thank you very much for today.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you very much for.
Set up for your family. Thank you very much.
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You guys take care. Have a nice day. Bye.